Welcome to Healthy Homesteading Adventures. This is the Health Edition. I'm Tamara Luevano. Today I want to talk to you about something very serious, which is our health. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church was given a health message. A wonderful woman named Ellen G. White was given visions on health, on how we could stay healthy, and how we should run our health institutions to treat people with natural remedies, teach them to follow the laws of health, and use things like diet and water and surgery only if absolutely needed to bring healing. I just want to tell you about my grandfather, A.W. Truman M.D. He was a pioneer in the Adventist Church in the medical work. He even met Ellen White. And as he was growing older, he saw a trend where drugs were coming in to replace the natural remedies. And instead of being sanitariums, our sanitariums became hospitals. So the legacy that he left was a number of letters that he wrote. And he made a lot of copies, which I have. And he was trying to send them out to whoever he could. He wrote these letters to sometimes the church, sometimes those in charge of the church leaders, I should say, and sometimes to those in charge of the medical work. So I want to start today by sharing one of those letters with you. I believe these words are very important. Reading through these has helped me to determine in my own life to follow the laws of health and to use only natural remedies and not to revert to the drugs for every ache and pain, because they all have side effects. So before we start reading this letter, which has a lot of quotes from Ellen White's writings, I would just like to pray. Father in heaven, thank you so much for the spirit of prophecy, the writings of Ellen White that you've given us, and the health message, the right arm of the message, that you've given us to guide us in these last days to have health and to keep from being sick. We thank you so much for those who tried to hold back the tide of drugs coming in, like my grandpa. Please bless the words that he wrote and the study that he did. As I read through it now, may it be a blessing to all who hear. May each person be convicted that it's time to get back to following the laws of health and using the natural remedies and learning them. And I just ask that your Holy Spirit will be with each heart and each mind that listens to these words. And I ask this in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Okay, he titles it A.W. Truman M.D. FACS. That stands for Fellow of the American College of Surgeons, I believe. And then FICS, I'm assuming, is the Fellow of the International College of Surgeons. 11232 Rosarita Drive, Loma Linda, California. He used to live in hot California. And it's hot here today, and I'm actually wet to stay cool. It's about 90 degrees. So please excuse that, but that's how I stay cool. Says the letter is written to all who bear responsibility for operating our sanitariums and hospitals, all S.D.A. physicians and nurses, and all who love these medical institutions and who share a deep and growing concern for their present and future welfare. By the way, there is no date on this. He died in 1970 at the age of 93. This might have been written when he was in his 80s, I'm not sure. Dear brethren, these pages have been compiled, prepared, and sent by a veteran sanitarium worker who has observed and has experienced much, if not all, of the changing fortunes and vicissitudes of our medical institutions. From the days of our first Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, in which I served 4 years, to our new Bates Memorial Sanitarium venture in Yonkers, New York, to the medical staff of which I have been appointed a member. Seventh-day Adventists have been operating sanitariums and health institutions for almost a century. Our first Health Reform Institute having been opened in Battle Creek, Michigan in 1866. We now have a church investment in sanitarium and hospital enterprises in excess of $90 million. Remember, this was probably in the 60s. At present, we are embarking upon our newest sanitarium venture, the beautiful Bates Memorial, so near New York City, for the benefit of the millions living in the nation's greatest metropolis. This will incur an additional investment of $1.5 million. Would it not seem highly fitting, and might it not be very rewarding and, in the end, financially profitable for us to pause, carefully consider, and rediscover God's designs, reasons, and purposes in directing His people and the establishment of, quote, many sanitariums, end of quote, throughout the world field? And might we not, at the same time, discover just how we are measuring up to God's ideals and designs, and also carefully assess and evaluate what substantial returns accrue to the church from this large investment in personnel and treasure? Let us not forget, there was a time when the Advent movement had no sanitariums, no physicians, no schools for the training of nurses, and no medical college. All of these had their birth in that precious gift of the Spirit of prophecy to the remnant church. And for all of these medical institutions and medical personnel, there was one crowning mission and objective, the advancement of present truth. Quote, times have changed, end of quote. World conditions have changed. Medical practice has undergone a great change. S.D.A. thinking and hospital planning have mightily changed, reflected so clearly in the shift from the spirit of prophecy and pioneer sanitarium, healthful living, and preventative medicine concept to the city community hospital concept. But let us ever keep one point crystal clear in our thinking. God has not changed. Quote, I am God, I change not, end of quote. His, quote, design, end of quote, for the S.D.A. sanitariums has not changed. Whatever God's design, purpose, and objectives to be achieved for His church and for the world through the sanitarium ministry were at the beginning of the movement, these have not undergone a tiny shade or a tittle of change, but remain identical to the present hour. But men, quote, wise above that which is written, end of quote, reason and assert, quote, true, the original objectives remain the same, but only our methods for achieving those objectives have undergone a great change, end of quote. Even a casual glance at the divine sanitarium pattern would reveal that not only did the divine medical missionary clearly indicate all of the objectives to be achieved through sanitarium ministry, but pointed out in minute detail the methods which alone could be successful in reaching those objectives. And as we may now compare that which we have with the vision of that which these sanitariums were to be, we may rightly evaluate the sorry spectacle which has resulted from substituting worldly, human plans and men's devisings for heaven's plans and methods of labor. From the chapter, quote, God's design in our sanitariums, end of quote, we quote, as our work has extended and institutions have multiplied, God's purpose in their establishment remains the same. The conditions of prosperity are unchanged. The human family is suffering because of transgression of the laws of God. The Lord desires that men shall be led to understand the cause of their suffering and the only way to find relief. He desires them to see that their well-being, physical, mental, and moral, depends upon their obedience to His law. It is His purpose that our institutions shall be as object lessons showing the results of obedience to right principles. in the preparation of a people for the Lord's second coming, a great work is to be accomplished through the promulgation of health principles. The people are to be instructed in regard to the needs of the physical organism and the value of healthful living as taught in the Scriptures, that the bodies which God has created may be presented to Him a living sacrifice, fitted to render Him acceptable service. Volume 6 of the Testimonies, page 224. Special light to shine through S.D.A. sanitariums. Ouch. The cat scratched me. Quote, "The Lord years ago gave me special light in regard to the establishment of a health institution where the sick could be treated on altogether different lines from those followed in any other institution in our world." End of quote. Parentheses, how do our community hospitals now measure up to this design? End of parentheses. Quote, "It was to be conducted upon Bible principles as the Lord's instrumentality, and it was to be in His hands one of the most effective agencies for giving light to the world. It was God's purpose that it should stand forth with scientific ability, with moral and spiritual power. All who should act a part in it were to be reformers, having respect to its principles, and heeding the light of health reform shining upon us as a people." Parentheses, with hundreds of non-SDA employees, many of whom make no profession of religion, how do we measure up on this design? End of parentheses. God designed that the institution which He should establish should stand forth as a beacon of light, of warning and reproof. 6th volume of the Testimonies, page 233. Is there one informed S.D.A. who can really feel that we are now achieving even one of the above designs, purposes, and objectives in the present ambitious, wide-spreading, ostentatious, worldly program being carried on in most of our medical institutions? Thank God for the few that are still trying against great odds to hold the line. Have not our health reform teaching, educational, enlightening, convicting, evangelical, once reformatory sanitariums, formerly conducted by humble, devoted, consecrated S.D.A. physicians and nurses, very largely degenerated into community hospitals in which hordes of Christless, godless, infidel or atheist, Hittite and Moabite physicians, too often slaves to evil habits, call the plays, prescribe the diet, the drinks, and the drugs, and our nurses and helpers must carry out their instructions, dance to their tunes, and become mere, quote, hewers of wood and drawers of water, end of quote, to these modern Philistines. I grant there is an occasional noble exception. If our pioneers, who suffered, prayed, and sacrificed to launch these institutions and to chart them for a safe course, could realize the credible loss of vision, the startling change in their course and direction, and the appalling degeneration of fundamental sanitarium ideals, would they not turn over in their graves? One of these dear old pioneers, Elder James White, who with his devoted companion, Ellen G. White, whose eyes were divinely anointed and who had so much to do in starting the first S.D.A. sanitariums, declared, "If the great adversary can mold these institutions according to the world's standard, his object is gain. If those who stand in responsible positions are weak in moral power and vacillating in principle, inclined to lean toward the world, there are enough who will be led. Evil influences must not prevail. I would rather die than live to see these institutions mismanaged or turned aside from the purpose for which they were brought into existence." 1T 107. There are photographs which cannot be taken by a split-second snapshot. Some pictures require a time exposure. In like manner, it requires time, effort, and prayerful study to get the complete picture of God's design for our sanitariums. Quote, and let them measure the pattern, end of quote. Indeed, it requires time to take the full measure of the true sanitarium pattern. How long has it been since we took its measure? Herein is our apology for this incomplete but lengthy document. Be it known that God gave to this people, quote, by a prophet, end of quote, as minute and detailed specifications regarding the objectives and methods of sanitarium work as Moses was given for making the wilderness tabernacle, or as King David had, quote, by the Spirit, end of quote, for constructing the permanent temple of worship upon Mount Zion. The king was given the weight for every basin, spoon, and flush hook. He had minute specifications for the entire building and for every piece of furniture. Quote, all this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me, even all the works of this pattern. End of quote. 1 Chronicles 28:19. I'm going to end here today and try to break this up into sections because I know that people can't keep their attention on such a lengthy document for so long. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and share this with as many friends as possible so we can get this message out there that we are not following God's methods in our institutions. Pray for a revival, pray for reformation. Bye.